In a small rural town in northern Thailand, a boy named Krit grew up in a house filled with tension instead of comfort. The walls were thin. The money was thinner. His father struggled with alcohol. His mother worked double shifts at a factory just to keep food on the table. Most nights, the air felt heavy, not from heat, but from unspoken stress. Krit learned early that life wasn't fair. At school, he wasn't the smartest. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the popular kid with clean shoes and a confident smile. His clothes were faded. His backpack had a broken zipper. Some students noticed. Some laughed. Every insult landed. At first, he let it sink into him. He believed the quiet voice in his head that whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe this is all you are." But one afternoon changed everything. After a humiliating presentation in class where he froze mid-sentence and heard snickers behind him, Krit walked home alone under the burning sun. His chest felt tight. His pride felt shattered. When he got home, he didn't turn on the TV. He didn't scroll through his phone. He sat on the floor of his small room and stared at the wall. And for the first time, he asked himself a different question. Not, why is this happening to me? But what am I going to do about it? That night, something shifted. He realized that the real enemy wasn't his classmates. It wasn't his father's addiction. It wasn't poverty. It was a voice inside his head that told him to quit. The next morning, Krit set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. There was no reason to wake up that early. School didn't start until 8, but he had made a decision. If suffering was unavoidable, he would choose his own suffering. He would get uncomfortable on purpose. He stepped outside into the dark morning air and started running. At first, it felt ridiculous. His legs were stiff. His lungs burned after just a few minutes. Every part of him wanted to stop. The voice came back. "This is stupid. Go home. Go back to bed. You're not an athlete." But this time he didn't listen. He kept running. Not fast, not gracefully, but consistently. When he finally stopped, bent over and gasping for air, he felt something unfamiliar. Control. For once, he had won a battle against himself. That small victory became addictive. Every morning, he ran. When it rained, he ran. When he was sore, he ran. When he was embarrassed at school, he ran harder. Pain stopped being punishment. It became training. At home, things didn't magically improve. His father still came home drunk some nights. Arguments still echoed through the house. There were evenings when Krit tried to study, while chaos unfolded in the next room. But instead of feeling like a victim, he started seeing his environment as resistance training for his mind. While other students studied in quiet bedrooms, he learned to focus through noise. While others rested comfortably, he woke up before sunrise. While others avoided discomfort, he chased it. One evening, after an especially brutal day, a failed math test, laughter from classmates, and another argument at home, Krit went into his room and dropped to the floor. He started doing push-ups. 10, 20, 30. His arms trembled. At 40, he collapsed, his chest pressed against the floor, sweat dripping down. He realized something powerful. His body wanted to quit long before it actually needed to. The limit wasn't physical. It was mental. From that day forward, every time he felt like quitting, in school and workouts in life, he asked himself one question. Is this really my limit, or is this just discomfort? That question changed him. His grades slowly improved, not because he suddenly became gifted, but because he built discipline. He studied even when he didn't feel motivated, especially when he didn't feel motivated. Motivation became irrelevant. Action became everything. Teachers began noticing. Not dramatic transformation, not overnight success, but consistency. And consistency builds confidence. One afternoon, his teacher handed back a math test. Krit expected another disappointing score. Instead, he saw something he hadn't seen before. An A-. It wasn't perfect, but it was earned. And for the first time, he understood something deeply. Suffering, when faced directly, doesn't break you. It builds you. That night, lying on his thin mattress, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above him, Krit made a quiet promise. He would never run from pain again. He would use it. He would let hardship sharpen him. He would build a version of himself so strong that no insult, no failure, no chaos at home could define him. Because character isn't built in comfort. It's built in the moments when quitting feels easier and you choose not to. And this was only the beginning. Suffering builds character. The mornings kept coming. 4:30 a.m. The alarm would pierce the silence, and for a split second, Crit would forget who he was trying to become. In that half-awake state, comfort whispered to him, "Stay in bed. You deserve rest. It's too early." But growth doesn't care about comfort. He would sit up, swing his legs over the side of the bed, and let his feet hit the cold floor. That small act, getting up when he didn't want to, became his first victory of the day. Outside, the village roads were empty. Street dogs roamed. The air was heavy with humidity. Crit ran under dim streetlights, his footsteps echoing in the quiet darkness. At first, he ran to escape his problems. Now, he ran toward something. Discipline. He began extending his distance. What started as 1 mile became 2. 2 became 4. Blisters formed on his feet. His toenails bruised. His thighs burned on hills he used to avoid. And something interesting happened. The more he pushed his body, the quieter his excuses became. Pain had a strange way of clarifying the mind. When your lungs are on fire and your legs are shaking, trivial fears lose their power. Embarrassment at school didn't feel as heavy anymore. The laughter of classmates didn't sting the same way, because he knew something they didn't. He was building armor. One Saturday, Crit decided to test himself. He had heard about a local amateur endurance race held outside the town. Nothing major, just a small community event. Most participants were adults. Some had real training shoes, watches, and experience. Crit had worn-out sneakers and stubborn determination. He signed up anyway. The morning of the race, doubt hit him harder than ever before. As he stood at the starting line, surrounded by stronger, older runners, the voice returned. "You don't belong here. You're going to embarrass yourself." His heart pounded. His palms sweated. For a brief moment, he considered stepping out of the line. No one would blame him. No one expected him to win. But that wasn't the point. When the whistle blew, he ran. The first mile felt controlled. By the third, his breathing grew heavy. By the fifth, his legs felt like concrete. Adults passed him. Some encouraged him. Some didn't even notice him. At mile 7, he hit a wall. His pace slowed dramatically. His vision blurred slightly. Every step sent pain through his calves. And then the real battle began. Not in his muscles, in his mind. "Stop. This is enough. You tried. That's what matters." His body screamed for relief. But then another voice, a stronger one, answered back. "This is what you came for." He remembered the nights, studying through chaos. The insults, the humiliation, the early mornings in darkness, the push-ups until collapse. This wasn't suffering. This was opportunity. He didn't speed up. He didn't suddenly feel strong. He just refused to stop. Step, step, step. Each one became a decision. When he finally crossed the finish line, he wasn't first. He wasn't even close to the top. He was somewhere in the middle, but he had finished. Bent over, hands on knees, chest heaving, he felt something deeper than pride. Proof that his limits were negotiable. Proof that pain didn't control him. Proof that he could endure more than he thought. That race changed how he saw everything. Back at school, when assignments piled up and pressure built, he didn't panic. He broke challenges down the same way he broke down miles, one step at a time. When classmates mocked him for running early in the mornings, he didn't argue. He didn't offend himself. He understood something they didn't yet understand. Weakness seeks comfort. Strength seeks resistance. At home, things reached a breaking point. One night, his father's anger escalated. Words were thrown like weapons. His mother cried. The house felt unstable, unpredictable. Crit felt rage building inside him, hot and explosive. He wanted to shout, to fight, to release it. Instead, he walked outside, under the dark sky. Fists clenched. He dropped to the ground and started doing push-ups. Not because it fixed his family, but because it controlled him. Every rep became a release. Every breath became focus. He realized something critical in that moment. You can't control your environment, but you can always control your response. That lesson hardened him. Over the next few months, the changes became visible. His posture improved. His eye contact strengthened. He spoke more clearly in class. Not louder, just more certain. Confidence wasn't given to him. It was earned through suffering. Teachers began trusting him with responsibilities, leading group projects, assisting with school events. He wasn't the most talented student, but he was becoming the most reliable, and reliability builds reputation. One afternoon, after another long training run, Crit sat alone on a hill overlooking the fields outside his town. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. His legs ached deeply. Sweat dried on his skin. He felt exhausted. But in that exhaustion, he felt alive. He reflected on who he used to be. The boy who froze during presentations, who believed insults, who felt trapped by circumstances. That version of him still existed, but it was shrinking, because suffering had forced him to confront himself. Not once, every day. And he understood something most people avoid. Character isn't built during big, dramatic moments. It's built in the small, invisible decisions, when no one is watching, when quitting would be easy, when comfort is calling your name. The world hadn't changed. His house was still imperfect. His finances were still limited. His path was still difficult. But he was no longer fragile. He was becoming resilient. And resilience doesn't shout. It endures. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, Crit stood up slowly, legs heavy but spirit steady. He knew harder challenges were coming, bigger tests, greater pain. But instead of fearing them, he welcomed them, because now he understood. Suffering wasn't something to survive. It was something to use. By the time Crit turned 18, discipline was no longer something he forced. It was who he was. The early mornings continued. The long runs grew longer. Push-ups turned into weighted workouts using old cement bags he found near construction sites. While others' age chased comfort and distraction, Crit chased pressure, because pressure had become his teacher. His goal was clear: earn a scholarship to a university in Bangkok, not just to leave his town, but to prove that circumstances did not define his ceiling. But the higher the goal, the greater the resistance. Senior year hit hard. Advanced classes, national exam preparation, financial stress at home, his father's health declining, hospital bills piling up, his mother physically exhausted from non-stop work. The weight felt crushing. For the first time in years, Crit felt real fear creeping back in. Not fear of embarrassment, fear of failure. One night, while studying for a critical exam, he stared at a page of equations that refused to make sense. He had been awake since 4:30 a.m. He had trained. He had helped his mother. He had studied for hours. And now his brain felt empty. The old voice returned. Maybe this is your limit. Maybe people like you don't make it out. His chest tightened. He closed his notebook and stepped outside into the humid night air. He stood there, breathing hard, frustration rising. Physical pain had become manageable. Mental pressure was different. Running didn't fix this. Push-ups didn't fix this. This was doubt at a deeper level. He asked himself the question that had guided him for years. Is this truly my limit or just discomfort? This time, the answer didn't come with confidence, and that was the real test. Anyone can feel strong when progress is visible, when grades improve, when muscles grow, when people notice. But what about when effort shows no immediate reward? What about when you give everything and still feel behind? That night, Crit understood something critical. Character isn't built by intensity alone. It's built by consistency under uncertainty. He went back inside, opened the notebook, started again, slowly, patiently. He stopped chasing motivation and focused on process, one problem at a time. He accepted that mastery would be repetitive and frustrating, and he stayed with it. Weeks passed. Exams arrived. In the silent testing hall, his heartbeat pounded as he opened the booklet. The questions were harder than expected. Panic flickered. But panic is a habit. So is control. He closed his eyes for 3 seconds. Breathed in, breathed out, and began. He didn't rush. He didn't compare himself to others flipping pages faster. He treated it like mile 7 of that race years ago. Uncomfortable, not impossible. When it was over, he felt uncertain but steady. Waiting for results felt endless. Every day stretched long. Every conversation about university tightened his stomach. Then the letter came. He held it carefully. His mother stood beside him, silent and nervous. He opened it. He had earned the scholarship. Not full coverage. Not luxury. But enough. His mother's eyes filled with tears. Years of struggle seemed to pause in that moment. Crit didn't celebrate loudly. He felt gratitude and responsibility. Bangkok was overwhelming. Tall buildings, endless traffic, confident students who seemed far more prepared, professors speaking rapidly in English, complex questions flying across lecture halls. On his first day, doubt returned. You don't belong here. For weeks, he felt behind, small, invisible. One afternoon after a brutal lecture, he sat in his dorm room staring at his worn-out sneakers. He had outgrown his old environment. Now he had to outgrow himself again. Growth, he realized, is not a one-time breakthrough. It's repeated discomfort at higher levels. So he returned to his foundation. Early mornings, he ran through Bangkok streets before sunrise, just like in his village. The city was louder, the pressure heavier, but pain felt the same. He added extra study hours, visited professors during office hours, even when intimidated, asked questions, even when his voice shook slightly. Embarrassment had lost its control over him because he had suffered before and survived. Months passed. The lectures became clearer. His stamina increased. His confidence stabilized, not loud, not arrogant, but grounded. One evening, standing on a pedestrian bridge overlooking a river of headlights, Crit reflected on the journey, the frozen presentation, the laughter, the chaos at home, the race he almost quit, the exam he almost gave up on. And he understood something with clarity. Suffering had never been the obstacle. Comfort would have been. If life had been easy, he would have stayed average. If things had been quiet, he would have stayed soft. Pain had forced expansion. He wasn't fearless. He still had doubts. But now he had proof. Proof that he could endure. Proof that he could adapt. Proof that growth lives on the other side of pressure. As he walked back to his dorm that night, city lights reflecting in his eyes, he felt something steady inside his chest. He wasn't chasing validation anymore. He was building identity. And identity, forged through suffering, doesn't break easily. The challenges weren't over. But neither was he. By his final year at the university in Bangkok, Crit was no longer the overwhelmed freshman staring at unfamiliar ceilings and doubting his place in the world. He had changed. Not in a dramatic, movie-like way, but in the quiet, internal way that matters most. His routines were still intact. He still woke before sunrise. He still trained before class. He still studied longer than required. But now, the reason was different. Before, he trained to escape weakness. Now, he trained to sharpen strength. There's a difference. Life, however, wasn't done testing him. During his final year, his father's health collapsed completely. Years of alcohol abuse had taken their toll. Medical calls became frequent. Hospital visits became normal. Bills increased again. This time, Crit wasn't a powerless teenager watching from the corner. He was a young man balancing university exams, part-time work, and family responsibility. Pressure stacked from every direction. Group projects, final thesis deadlines, financial strain, emotional weight. Sleep became shorter. Days became heavier. And once again, the voice returned. You've done enough. You've already proven yourself. It's okay to slow down. It sounded reasonable, almost kind. That's what made it dangerous. One night, after leaving the hospital, Crit sat alone outside on a concrete bench. The city lights flickered in the distance. His body felt drained. His mind felt overloaded. For the first time in years, tears formed in his eyes, not from weakness, from exhaustion. He whispered to himself, "I'm tired." And that was the truth. Strength doesn't mean you never feel tired. It means you decide what to do while tired. He sat there for a long time, reflecting. On the early mornings in his village. On the race, he almost quit. On the exam he nearly gave up on. On the move to Bangkok. Every stage of his life had demanded a new version of him. And every time suffering had introduced that version, he realized something profound in that quiet moment. Pain had never been permanent, but growth was. The suffering of high school ended. The suffering of adaptation ended. Each painful season eventually passed, but the discipline, resilience, and confidence built during those seasons stayed. So he stood up from that bench, not because he felt energized, not because motivation returned, but because identity demanded it. He went back to his dorm and opened his laptop. He worked on his thesis until 2 a.m., not perfectly, but consistently. Weeks later, final presentations arrived. As he stood at the front of the lecture hall, presenting his research, he felt a flash of memory, the frozen boy from years ago, the laughter, the humiliation. Now he spoke clearly, calmly, with control, not because fear was gone, but because he had practiced courage under pressure for years. When graduation day came, the campus was filled with families, cameras, celebration, and pride. His mother stood in the crowd, wearing simple clothes, eyes shining brighter than anyone else's. His father, weaker now but sober, stood beside her. When Crit walked across the stage and accepted his degree, the applause felt distant, not because it didn't matter, but because the real victory had happened long before this moment. It happened at 4:30 a.m. in darkness. It happened at mile 7, when his legs wanted to quit. It happened at the desk when equations made no sense. It happened on the hospital bench when exhaustion tried to convince him to slow down. The diploma was a symbol. The character was the achievement. After the ceremony, his mother hugged him tightly and whispered, "You endured." That word stayed with him. Endured. He hadn't been the most talented. He hadn't been the luckiest. He hadn't had advantages. But he endured. Years later, when Crit began mentoring younger students from backgrounds similar to his, he didn't tell them that life would be easy. He didn't promise quick success. He told them the truth. "You will suffer," he would say calmly. "But suffering is not your enemy. Avoiding it is." He taught them what he had learned the hard way. Comfort keeps you small. Pressure expands you. Excuses weaken you. Ownership strengthens you. And limits are usually negotiations with fear. One evening, long after graduation, Crit returned to his hometown. He ran the same quiet roads where his journey began. The streetlights looked smaller now. The distance felt shorter. But he remembered exactly how heavy those first runs had felt. Standing under the early morning sky, breathing steadily, he smiled. The environment hadn't changed much, but he had. Suffering had stripped away insecurity. It had burned away excuses. It had revealed discipline. It had built identity. And identity, once forged through repeated hardship, becomes unshakable. Crit understood now that character is not built in a single breakthrough moment. It's built in daily decisions. When you wake up early, when you study while others sleep, when you keep going while others quit, when you choose responsibility over resentment, when you answer pain with action instead of complaint. Suffering didn't make him special. It made him solid. And solid people don't collapse under pressure. They carry it. As the sun began to rise over his small hometown, Crit took one last deep breath and started running again. Not because he needed to escape, not because he had something to prove, but because growth never truly ends. And the man who once tried to survive suffering had become someone who understood it. Suffering builds character, but only if you decide to build with it.